This is my oral movie presentation. I chose The Perks of Being a Wallflower, a movie I have never seen. Kind of wanted to see it when I was growing up as a teenager. Not a fan of it though. We have Charlie, the main character, an freshman entering high school, trying to make friends, working through adolescence, love, and mental health while trying to cope with his childhood trauma. He enters this friend group of so-called misfits, or what they call wallflowers. He experiences, drugs and alcohol, and falling in love with the main female character, Sam. Um, he is a freshman. His friends are a senior. So, we go throughout this, and they have like the ups and downs of typical teenage behavior, and probably like halfway towards the end when he's realizing that his friends are going to graduate because they are seniors and they are going away, that he's going to be alone. And we see his depression, and mainly that PTSD and that anxiety worsen. But he continues to help his friends get them where they need to be, but he really needs to focus on himself. And throughout the movie, we see, flashbacks of his past, of his aunt, who we come to find out um, did sexually abuse him as a child, which led to um, a severe breakdown, where he becomes hospitalized, and eventually he's released and he's all better and he's making a turn for his life. So again, Charlie, high school freshman, he's very shy and awkward, has trouble forming friends, and is trying to manage, like his disorder while growing up at the same time. Sam is the primary love interest, and good friend, helping him navigate his emotions and explore life, instead of watching it from the outside. Patrick is another close friend of his, proving that you can be so authentic, and unique as a person, and it doesn't matter to anybody else because that's who you are. Um, Mary Elizabeth, I'm mentioning her because they did kind of have a relationship, but it didn't go well. And then the English teacher, Mr. Anderson, is someone who I think kept his academics up and realized that, he is intelligent, and wanted to give him the hope that continue writing and continue reading, and you're going to do great things. Um, he is 15, later turned 16. He has a birthday. He is a white male. He is observant. He overthinks and analyzes everything, but he also understands at the same time, which is why they deemed him a wallflower. He's very shy and awkward, not having any friends, but fitting in with these so-called misfits. He's very empathetic, caring, and loyal. He's also very intelligent. He's very book smart. He doesn't have the best relationship with his family, I feel like. You can kind of see like he's withdrawn from them. He does care deeply about his sister though. But the family is kind of just like very much so in the background of this movie. But his friends, they make sure he feels included, even though there is that freshman versus senior contrast there. Um, and then, we have the Aunt Helen, who sexually abused him. Um, which is why during the movie at one point we see when there's an intimate moment between Sam and Charlie that we have a trigger of the hand on the thigh, and this ultimately creates that mental breakdown that leads to his hospitalization. So I am mainly focusing on PTSD. I do think there is depression and anxiety also in this as well. But PTSD, with the flashbacks, the avoidance, the alterations in mood, limited interest in activities, and irritability resulting in aggression, um, causing total distress in his life, is the big concept here. And when we apply that in Charlie, we see that his flashbacks of his aunt, um, they don't happen often, but they do in certain situations and with certain people. Um, Again, he tends to avoid people and has trouble making friends, which is why he's so socially awkward. We see his mood change depending on the situation, where we can tell, like, at least I can tell as someone who suffered from depression and now has anxiety, like a situation that we're not comfortable in, things like that from a personal perspective. But what's really nice is that he can tell that he's getting bad again, and he verbally states that at one point when we start seeing that downhill. Um, He doesn't have many interests, but he experiences, substances such as drugs and alcohol, um, as a way of fitting in, and probably more so like a coping mechanism to kind of forget what's happening around him. Um, and when we see that like irritability that results in aggression, that is when he sees his friend being bullied and beaten and punched in the cafeteria. So he kind of blacks out and realizes that he just knocked out three like football guys, which you really, like they're the mean guys. But he doesn't remember it. We have that again, derealization going on. Um, when we talk about the etiology, I'm going to talk about the four different kinds. I'm going to kind of summarize them because they can be long, and I tried to like find the most important parts when applying it to Charlie, because again, the etiology can be very, very in depth. So when we talk about the biological, I'm going to talk about the amygdala, because the amygdala is our emotional regulation. And I say that because, when he saw his friend being beaten, he chose fight or flight. And, at this time, he wasn't good. He wasn't in the friend group. He had been kicked out for 2 weeks because of something that happened. And he decided to fight. And that is a common hallmark of PTSD, is that fight or flight response. We also see a deficit in fear extinction, but over time, we begin to see those triggers for those fear reactions, such as Sam touching his legs, the little lights in the snow was a flashback, and then when he walked into the kitchen, it was all of his aunt. And according to our textbook, the brain is the most vulnerable to the effects of cortisol during childhood, leading to ultimately more stress as time goes on. So think about what happens to you as a child, and now you're a teenager, and then you move into adulthood. That stress is going to increase if it's not resolved, or those triggers, if we're not coping with those, we're going to have many, many breakdowns. So again, that emotional regulation, our feelings, behaviors, responses related to our emotions. When it comes to psychological, he tends to extend that trauma-related stimuli to other situations to avoid anything surrounding the trauma itself, which, could be why he doesn't make friends easily, or why he blames himself for his aunt's death, which you see in the last few scenes. And, he's got very dysfunctional thinking, negative thinking, in addition to his friend's suicide. These all accumulate to that heightened PTSD. Near the end of the movie, though, we see he's trying to come to terms with his past as he's being hospitalized, leading to an increase in more resilient behavior and maybe a more diminished effect of PTSD. When it comes to social, I'm going to talk about just the social support that is so, so huge with any disorder. But having that social network, like the friends he made, realizing near the end that his friend was there for support, and they now know what happened, and that he's not, in this alone. And, that reduces the stress and anxiety that maybe he had, and could possibly prevent for future occurrences or triggers for PTSD. Social support is such a big contributing factor to alleviating PTSD symptoms. Friends, family, social interactions, resources, community, those are all such good interventions. Sociocultural, this one's going to be shorter because it talks about like discrimination experiences such as bullying, witnessing your friends being treated unfairly or being treated differently can be a predictive PTSD status. We don't know of any bullying that happened as a kid, but we saw some as a teenager, as well as the domestic abuse and his friends being beaten up in the cafeteria. We could also hone in on social isolation, wanting to belong to a group of friends, that sort of thing. The treatment plan, I would do MDMA, as well as CBT, because CBT is known to be the most effective, putting a focus on extinguishing the fear surrounding the trauma-related event while taking that dysfunctional cognition and thinking and re-correcting it. But there's also prolonged exposure, trauma-focused CBT, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Those are all highly effective as well. But CBT would be the best at identifying and attacking the traumatic event, and Um, Also, the education surrounding PTSD and the therapy would be super, super helpful. Um, and I know I'm getting to like past the 10-minute mark. I'm so sorry. Um, the movie was not my favorite. I feel like it was a very like teenage cliche, kind of awkward. I feel like that at times there was like a lot going on, but then at other times we kind of just like were dropped into a scene with like no context. I also feel like I know there are like varying, like mild to severe forms of PTSD, but I feel like with sexual abuse in childhood, I feel like the PTSD would be much more severe. And I wish that we could have seen that portrayal because it's not something that we see often in a regular movie. It's typically in like war movies and stuff like that. Um, I also think like the wallflower term makes sense. The perks of being a wallflower is, you're in the background, that kind of thing. But I would definitely like to see another movie that portrays like severe PTSD with that depression and anxiety, those comorbidities, on a more severe level that, you know, gives more context into his childhood and why, as a teenager, he's dealing with it now. Um, so yeah, that is my movie oral presentation.